I'm Caitlin and I am doing a no by year. Welcome back. Today's video, I'm just gonna get right into it. It's going to be an eyeshadow palette tag. I believe it's from like 2020 or something, and I think it was Samantha March, and she maybe collaborated with someone else to do it. If I can find the original videos for this, I will link them in the description. But basically it's a list of questions that I found online about eyeshadow palettes, and it was fun because I kind of got to like dig into my collection and really think about some stuff. Let's just start. So the first one is your newest palette. So my newest eyeshadow palette would be the Natasha Denona My Dream palette. It was in my Beautylish Lucky bag. So I purchased it in December of 2022 and then it arrived January 2023. So this would be the newest to my collection. Second question, what is your oldest palette? And I had to kind of do some digging and like really thinking about it. I think my oldest palette from when like I really started getting into makeup and when I really started like amassing a collection, and it would be this, the Urban Decay Naked palette, and this was the original one. So basically I'm considering like 2012, 2013, probably when I started to like really focus on buying makeup and when I really got into watching like beauty YouTube. Before then, like the most eyeshadow that I ever wore would have been like the little trio or quad or whatever of the CoverGirl makeup, just basically like neutral taupes essentially. So apart from that, this would be my oldest palette. Alright, most expensive palette, and I have two that are tied. The Natasha Denona Blue Purple and Green Brown. So retail value, these are the most expensive. I think they're, what is it, $239 or something? $250? I can't imagine they're $250. Are they $250? I'm not sure. Either way, I did not pay full price for these. So it's not the most expensive, I don't think, of what I've spent on a palette, but retail value, they're the most expensive. I think I paid maybe like half price, or I think one of them I got for only like $100. Either way, retail value, these two are my most expensive palettes. So next would be most affordable palette. I have a couple palettes that I probably spent less on than what I'm about to show you. One in particular, like the Persona Identity 2 palette, I believe I only paid $9 plus shipping because I bought it off of Mercari. But I think retail, this is like $40 or something maybe. So the most affordable overall in terms of what I have would be these two Flower Beauty palettes, the Jungle Lights and Desert Lights. I think they retail for $18. I'm almost positive that when I got them they were on sale, so probably I got them for like $15. But overall in my collection, from what I could find, these two are the most affordable that I have. For everyday palette, I don't have a particular palette that I use every day, and I don't really have a particular eye look that I go for every day. I like switching things up, and I like to use glitter and multi-chromes and colors. When I read everyday palette, I take that to mean most like neutral, not necessarily natural looking, at least not for me. I have two different things for this because I couldn't really fully decide. The first being this Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana eyeshadow palette, the shade Bronze Bliss. So this would be like the most, oops, I never took that off. This would be the most everyday because I would basically just wear one of the shimmers, like the metallics, as an all over lid, and basically that could be it, and then just deepen up the outer corner. If I wanted to do something sort of light and not too dramatic, then the Makeup by Mario palette, the Ethereal Eyes, just because the mattes are pretty neutral, and then it still has some glitter, which is what I would go for, but it's not like over the top like the Pat McGrath is. And honestly, what a horrible business strategy that this was limited edition. I feel like this would be a bestseller like for years if they made it a permanent part of the collection. It seems silly to me why they didn't do that. That's just a sidebar, I guess. Okay, most colorful palette. I have two that are kind of tied. Both are from Blend Bunny Cosmetics. So I have the Blends palette, which is basically a pretty typical like rainbow palette because it has like every color. And then the other being the Surge palette, because to me it's just as colorful. It just sort of leans more grungy, I guess, in terms of color. This is like straight up bright color, and then this would be not. I don't know, but then it also has like the neons at the bottom, so that also makes it super colorful to me. So both of these are like a tie for the most colorful that I have. Okay, smallest palette. I have quite a few that I like couldn't really decide between. So I have some quads made, like the Charlotte Tilbury quads are quite small in terms of size, but I think these little quads from Viseart are also about the same smallness, like size wise. So it's between like this, the Victoria Beckham eyeshadow. Is this a palette? Kind of. There's 4 different shades, so I guess you could kind of call it a quad, but it's all one big pan. So like, is it a palette? I don't know, but they're also quite dainty but hefty. They're like metal, so they're quite heavy, but size wise they're small. And then just the mini gold palette is quite small to me, like thin wise. And then I guess what would sort of be the winner of this category for me are the Viseart Petite Pro. I have 2 of them, and mostly, so these are like the smallest pan sizes that I have in a palette, but then they're also like size wise it's a little bit bigger than the Victoria Beckham and like a little longer than the Viseart quad, but not quite as tall as the Viseart quad. So it was kind of hard to decide, but if I had to choose like one that would be the smallest, I would go with these ones because they have the smallest pan size. Okay, and then so those were the smallest, and then next would be the biggest, and also kind of tied the Natasha Denona ones because like size wise it's a little bit bigger, but then the Blend Bunny has 30 shades in it, so those are kind of tied. Like just size would be this, because it's a little bit longer and thicker. That's what she said. Like heftiness wise. And then the amount of shades would be this one because it has more than the Natasha Denona one. Okay. Palette with the best memory. I don't know that I have a particular palette that has the best memory, but in terms of like nostalgia, I guess I would also go with the Urban Decay Naked palette, just because this was like at the time when I first started getting more heavily into makeup, watching beauty YouTube, focusing and like learning more about makeup, because prior to this and then like what came after, I was just wearing makeup, like I legit just had a makeup bag and everything fit in it, and for the most part I was just wearing like the Bare Minerals foundation. I'd have that CoverGirl little eyeshadow palette, throw one of those on and then put mascara on, and that was basically it. I guess Bare Minerals had like the warmth that I guess, like I used it as a bronzer, but I didn't really understand that it was a bronzer. I kind of just totally bought into the Bare Minerals marketing of like swirl and tap, and they told me that you wear the powder, like the skin color powder all over, and then you would wear warmth like on your cheeks, forehead, across the nose type of thing. So it was before I even understood the concept of like base makeup and how you would wear and apply foundation, blush. Like I didn't even really understand what blush was. I certainly didn't have a highlighter. I did nothing to my eyebrows, like they were so pale and like non-existent. I look back on some of my photos from like college and high school and it's like, where are your eyebrows? I don't know. So nostalgia wise, I guess the Urban Decay Naked palette. Palette worth the hype. I couldn't really fully decide. So I think just in general, the Pat McGrath Mothership palettes, if you find a color story that resonates with you and like that's gonna be your color story, then I definitely think it's worth the hype. I think the quality of the eyeshadows is great. You know, Pat McGrath is a makeup artist, so she really knows what she's doing in terms of formula and stuff. The particular one that I chose to like show is the Moonlit Seduction, but just because this is my favorite Mothership palette that I have, which I guess also ties into not the next question, but the next one is favorite palette from a favorite brand. In terms of eyeshadow, Pat McGrath are one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas, and so my favorite Pat McGrath palette is the Moonlit Seduction, so that covers that question as well. But the Motherships, so what I also like about Pat McGrath in general is that her website, like the Pat McGrath website, does 25 and 30% off. It feels like all the time. So, you know, I know $130 for an eyeshadow palette is a lot, and unless it's in your budget to do so, I think if you can wait for a sale, like getting this at 25 or 30% off, then it's definitely worth the hype. But again, like if you can find a color story that really resonates with you, then the quality of these eyeshadows is fantastic. Okay. A palette that is not worth the hype to me is the Patrick Ta. This is the first one. I was kind of just underwhelmed with this palette, and because of that I never reached for it, but I feel like it was talked about like all over the place when it first released, and because I was so disappointed by it, to me that makes it not worth the hype. In terms of the quality, like I feel like the quality is just not on par with a brand like Pat McGrath or even Natasha Denona. So not worth the hype and not worth the money. Last question is most used palette. And I don't have an eyeshadow palette that is the most used because I like to change up my eyeshadow and like what I'm using, and because I have so many eyeshadow palettes, it's kind of rare that I use the same one like all the time. So for this, like my most used right now is my own created eyeshadow palette that I put together with singles. This is like my neutral grungy textured palette. This is what I've been using most frequently, like currently. But in terms of like other eyeshadow palettes, I guess my second most used would probably be the Moonlit Seduction. But other than that, I switch up my eyeshadow makeup so much that I don't have one really that's my most used. Okay, so that completes the eyeshadow tag video. This was really fun. I got to dig through my collection, sort of revisit some things, think about things, like really take a think about how often I'm using some of these palettes and how often I'm not using some of these palettes. It was pretty fun to just dig through and take a look and reminisce about the makeup that I have. If you also want to take a look through your collection and answer some of these questions, I will put the questions that I answered in the description box below, and I will try to find the original videos that like started this tag, and I will also link those in the description. If you liked the video, then hit the like button. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe, stick around. If there's anything else from me in particular that you want to see, leave a comment. That is all I've got for you today. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!